what Sam's question was coming to, is to, as companies gain that muscle, they go big, they're going to want to do these things themselves. You have to buy your servers, you have to rack them, you have to ensure that you apply routine maintenance, you have to have backups, have those tape drives ready, ship those. They can't be in the same location with the server. They have to be, all of that operations, you have to, as an organization, do those things. However, if you're moving into an AWS managed service, this is now where all of that is taken care of by AWS. So AWS would ensure that the servers are racked, they are fully patched, they are automated for the backups. So you just opt into the backups. And if you want automatic recovery when a node has failed or when that volume drive has broken up, how do we do that self-healing of replacing? All of this, AWS would take care of you. And then you worry about your application, your logic, the construction of your application. And this is what differentiates you from your competitors. So I believe, Sam, to answer your question, if companies perhaps move back to the self-managing of the infrastructure, if they go to the cloud and the trend is to that they will be moving back, they're going to have to factor what it is that they will be giving away by so doing. I think when someone comes in and has an idea of an app, they want to deploy and run an application, the one thing that they really don't want to be spending their energies on is to worry about the infrastructure that powers it. They want to be thinking about it and the application, what it can do, how this application that they are thinking is different to what's already on the market. And if they can focus on that and build on that and let someone whose business is to manage and build infrastructure do that for them, I still see there's still a role for this model. But I don't have a crystal ball to see what will happen in the future. So maybe what you have read there, it could come through. Now, before we get into the technologies of, okay, here's the tools for this persona, and here's a tool for that data type, there's a very, very important, if I can call it, topic that comes with data. You have to have some data governance in the organization. Data governance is more about processes. It's about people. It's about you saying, we have this data. This data, you decide, okay, what's the process for it? It's going to sit in this database. What this data, it has to be classified. It's sensitive data. It's our competitive data. Who has access to this? Junior person cannot access. Senior person can access. All of this is governance. It's nothing to do with the technology itself. The tooling and all of that, you then apply once you've decided on the governance part. Now, I have on the screen various options that are available that we are seeing on the market. Some organizations, they like the approach of a centralized data governance. This is where now you have a data governance organization that's at the center. It dictates the strategy for all the departments within the company. This is what we're going to be doing. This is how it's done. And then on the far side of the spectrum, we have other organizations who says each of our business units, you can sit and decide on how they manage and do with their data strategy. As long as we don't have any breaches, we are happy, we will leave it for you to govern. Or you can have other ones where it says, they sit in the middle that says, all right, we'll have a data governance organization that will advise these various departments on how to do. All of these are currently what we are seeing on the market today. And the point is not for organizations or for yourselves to think about which one of it is better for you. All of them, they work. All of them, they can be applied to your organization and function as long as you have the mechanisms to support it. The important part or the key takeaway there is that when you're dealing with data, you need to have a data governance, a strategy on how that will guide everyone else on how this data is handled. And this is now going to be the pointing that thing that points everyone back into when they need to understand, okay, we have these new data sources that are coming in. Now we have social media, that's data that's coming in. When it comes in, no one is not going to be knowing what to do, because the organization that's responsible for data governance is going to be saying, okay, this is how we deal with this new data. It's a plan, and everyone just adopts and build on that. So we touched on the challenges, right? So here's the challenges. We've got all these explosion of data. You have personalities now that are interacting with your data, and all of this, you have to make decisions, quick. Now, moving into the tooling now, this is now where we start to say, okay, what tooling is then available on the AWS cloud? So on AWS, we have our philosophy, which is you need to have the right tool for the right job. And that is why our databases are not generalistic databases, but they are purpose-built. So you would see here on the screen that we do offer a very wide range of selection of database engines that you can choose from when you come into our platform. This is because data sources are different, data access patterns are different, and performance requirements are also different. Therefore, you cannot have one database that can do everything. You have to have this wide options. But the most popular one is relational database. This is the one that's been around for a very long time. This is where, when I started into this world of databases, I got introduced into this one. This is the core of databases. This is where you run transactional systems. And it's been around for a very, very long time. And we do have dominant players that have actually made a stamp for themselves into this. However, you would see that on the AWS platform, we have what we call the Amazon Relational Database Service. So this is where we have supporting both open source and commercial databases. But alongside this RDS, which supports these existing databases that were there on the market, working with our customers, we also then saw the need to say, look, today the databases and how they're working, there has to be like a database that's born in the cloud that's geared in towards what today's world is. And this is where the Amazon Aurora fits. You would see it's also a relational database. It fits within that. It supports MySQL and Postgres, and it has those commercial grade performance features in it. But moving along then to the on the spectrum, you would see that we do also have the NoSQL relation. These are non-relational in their category. So we have the Dynamo for your key value pairs, and we have the MongoDB for your document. I mean, these databases allow developers to just store and query, documents, JSON documents, as an example. The volumes that you need and require, I mean, it's for like your gaming applications. On AWS, you just come on DynamoDB. You don't mind about the infrastructure. It's fully managed for you. You just create a table and you start inserting and consuming this data. And because this is non-relational, you don't have to be thinking too ahead about that whole schema. So your tables, you can manage those things, unlike the relational database where you have to have that fixed schema, and every schema change is an application change. It's a downtime, possible downtime. We also try and reduce those. But we've also added various other categories, for in-memory database. This is now where we're doing our caching. So you can find that if you want to cache, yes, other databases, they can do these caching capabilities, but we have a purpose-built database that's for doing that. We have Neptune, which is doing graph. Graph is relational. This is kind of where if you on social media apps like on Facebook, and they say, you are friends with Vuyisa, and you are therefore most probably going to be a friend with Oseno. That relation, there's a database that does that. It's Neptune. But you can also do time series. This is where you for those IoT devices, which Hossein is going to be telling you about, when they're populating their information over a series of time, you can have a database that's geared towards that. And we also have the QLDB, which is the ledger database. This is for now for these crypto and Bitcoin technologies. This is where now if you are doing an activity on the database, we're saying, okay, because this is a financial data, it's a ledger, how do we ensure that whatever that has gone in here, it's immutable, it's verifiable, it hasn't changed over time, or we're tracking how it has changed over time, but it can't be deleted. So that's where this database fits in. And you may choose many of these depending on the kind of application that you're doing. If you're doing a social media application, or if you're doing an industrial telemetry application or supply chain, application, various tools you need for the various jobs. And that's what is our philosophy at AWS. So now these are the data stores on the database side. So what do we have on the analytics side? On the analytics side, we do have also various choices so that customers can use. But if you're thinking about analytics, right? At analytics, you first have the data ingestion phase. So what do we have in that space? So we have real-time or batched as two major alternatives that you can look into. In the real-time space, we do have in our portfolio Amazon Kinesis. Now, this is, you can either be streaming data or streaming videos. So it has that. And it also has the Kinesis Firehose, which it can then help to integrate with other services. In some services, in some use cases, we also support managed Kafka. This is now where we also are streaming in like data if you are streaming in and you already are familiar with Kafka. So we do have a managed Kafka so that you can adopt here. Now, there are times when you would want to also work in batch modes. Not everything is in real time. So for services like that, we do have the Amazon Airflow that work in that space where you can do these things. And as you can see there, we have some use cases that are there for this real time data streaming. Like when you are using an app, and let's say, how does a banking app track if they are offering you options? Do you click on these options or do you just skip? So it's, that web clickstreams. So clickstreams, they are tracking those with services like data stream so that they can keep track on those changes that you are making there. We do have the data processing, right? So data is ingested. We now can leverage tools such as Glue. Now to build that, that you are extracting this data. So it's coming in, we are extracting, we make some changes to it, and then we load it onto a location for further processing. So we do have Glue, which is our very own ETL job, ETL tool that you can use there. Or you can also leverage services like EMR. This is now Elastic MapReduce, which you can be running any of the open source frameworks on top. In this phase, we can also leverage serverless technologies like the Lambda functions to create event-driven workflows, which is a very popular, if I can call it, adoption framework as well, where people now are moving into the whole serverless framework. But there's also a new service, Glue Data Brew. Now, this is a new addition to this analytic services in the processing state. This one allows people without deep coding skills. So if you don't have these deep coding skills, how are you going to prepare your data sets for the various use cases? And Data Brew sits into this space where it allows those people that are coming into the industry, they don't have those coding skills, it helps them with this. Now, when we talk about the data lake itself, right, the centerpiece of that is S3. So S3 is this durable, cost-effective storage layer. So this is where you would store this vast volumes of data. It has 11 nines of durability, so you can know that once you've stored something on S3, you'll have more chances to find it. Services such as lake formation, they also come into this. What they do, they allow you as a customer now to put that governance piece. So you now allow, so okay, you've got this data, but how is the data secure? Who has access to this data? What access levels do they have and what they can do? You then use the services like lake formation to build that. And then we have the data catalog, right, and the crawlers. This now when customers have made changes or there's new data sets that are coming in. So this is now the service that the crawlers would be there listening for those new data sets. If there's new data, you as a customer don't necessarily always all the time have to go back. If you have the crawlers, they go in and then they recognize that there's a new data, and then based on how you have defined your pipeline, it then takes an action on that. And then the catalog itself, you just make sure that all that metadata, which will help you in the query, is documented. And then when it comes to the visualization now, this is now where you do the analytics part. So this is very important because now you've stored the data, you've ingested the data, you've made some changes to this data, processed it, it's in your storage, it's in S3, but it has to be somehow, you have to be able to search and visualize this data, right? And some customers, they would run ad hoc queries, they don't come in and want to do everything all the time on the data. We have a service for that, Amazon Athena, but sometimes you want a dashboard where people can see what's going on, what's, that data that's there, it has to be doing something. You build a dashboard. You can use QuickSight for that visualization, or you can use, Elasticsearch for searching this log data. So if maybe your data there is logs, how do you search within logs and get some meaningful insights out of that? So we have Elasticsearch for this. So you can see that, again, it comes back to that right tool for the right job. So you don't have a tooling that does all of everything. We always try to say, here's the right tool for the right job. And all of this, you would see that we use, our own data warehouse application, which is Amazon Redshift. And you would see that you can, through there's some architectures that I'm going to show you, you can see how you can build using this data warehouse application as the centerpiece on how you can drive your analytics in your own organizations. And finally, with this increasing, demand for decision making, now this is now where you need some predictions, to understand, okay, we've got this data that shows us this is how these customers have behaved in the past. Can we, from this understanding, which we've gained from those insights when we search those logs with Elasticsearch, and we have built these pipelines with Glue and transform this data. Now that we have done all of this, can we understand what could they do in the future? So this is where the machine learning use cases come in. So we do have services that also comes with pre-built machine learning services that you can plug in there in that space. So that you as a customer, you don't have to be always starting, all of these from the start. For example, one of the most popular ones in the financial services industry is the fraud detection. It's a machine learning language. It comes pre-built. You can then adopt that and then use that. But we do have all these other services that you can then use and you can adopt and build into your pipeline. Now you've heard me talk about the services, but let's talk about how do customers use this now, because all of that, this is just a service there, it's a building blocks. But now how do you put these building blocks together to do and deliver on a solution? One of the key pillars of a well-architected solution is that it has to operate and operate at scale. Now, if you have a database, how do you know if it's performing well or not performing well? Traditionally, people would rely on hearing from their users that, hey, our system is down or our system is misbehaving, and then they go and check, or they've added some alerts, you know, where they will get alerted when maybe the system is down or not. But this part of the architecture is one of the most touching on many of the people that are working with the databases. How do we ensure that this database is operationally excellent? So to do that, I mean, you have to have some telemetry and some observability matrices that you collect to achieve this operational excellence. So AWS databases, they come with native integration to CloudWatch. Now, this you can do to deliver and stream those logs. These could be your own database logs. It's the metrics, all of that. It can be streamed to this service, CloudWatch. And from there, you can start to build a system of understanding. How is the database performing? You can automate the detection of things like, are we having deadlocks? Are we having something that's about to, do we have someone who keeps querying something and we can see that, okay, it keeps failing. So it's recorded in our log that it keeps failing. What do we then need to do? And for that, you can maybe start thinking about creating like a playbook to say, if we are having this kind of behavior, therefore this is how we should deal with it in an automated way. So by using CloudWatch, and you can use Lambda as well with this integration, you can filter the logs and you can filter to just the things that you know and you can pick up as anonymous. You don't have to be, even though the service itself gets the whole log, but you can in that log says, we only want to listen for these keywords, because when these keywords are recorded in the log, it is an indication that an action needs to be taken. And that's what you do now with a Lambda function. So you would write a Lambda function to say, if we are picking up this keyword in our log, go and run this response, because it means that we have a deadlock, maybe as an example. So go and kill a session. It's a simplistic example, but that's the kind of things that you can build. And you can build many more use cases by doing this. And it doesn't therefore require any intervention on your part. The system can automatically react and respond to this, and you just get a recording in your events logs that there are these events that has happened. So if these happen overnight, it doesn't mean that for a 24/7 operating system, it only works and waits for you to be in office hours to react to that. But sometimes you can take this a notch up, right, and want mechanisms that deal with things like real-time query auditing, right? So you want to be able that when I'm making a change, this change that I'm making to the database, even though I've logged on with correct credentials, so I am Vuyisa, I'm approved to connect to here, but is what I'm about to do an approved change? Because I could run a change that could render this whole operations to a halt and lose businesses money and loss of credibility due to a downtime. So you can build what we call streaming of these activities. So you stream the activities as I'm making the changes. So the queries and the execution, the statements that I'm doing, these are then we call the database activities. You stream these database activities, and RDS natively integrates to support these things. This is not something you have to configure and you have to build yourself. It's something that you just have to opt in, and you say, okay, you would like to have it on, and the moment you'd like to have it on, it has this capability. So, and with this, you can also then, this is now where the security teams can also integrate this. It could also be third parties. And this is where you can do those inspections and auditing and seeing if what is being done is necessary. Now, I would like to caution people when they want to go down this path, they just need to also test this and test it thoroughly, because you are now introducing an extra step or a check, along the operations of someone. So if someone is connected to the database doing an activity, there's always going to be a check because, so therefore you are adding some overhead into your database. You just need to know if your application or your workloads will be able to handle that. And in the event-driven technology, then you can even say, okay, I've got the streaming, Lambda, listen to this, and this is the action you do. I want you to allow this statement to continue, or no, this is an unauthorized thing. Stop it right there and there, and maybe send a notification to someone's manager to say they were trying to run this. We haven't approved this change in our system. So this is all possible, and this is one of the popular patterns. And this is now how customers in the market, we are seeing them starting to adopt and getting those benefits of moving and choosing those databases that are running on AWS. Now, we've talked about the database. Now let's move to the analytics side. There's an emergence, right, in the analytics side of the lakehouse architecture within AWS. Now, the question becomes, when you're thinking about, when you talk about this, we already know that customers are using data warehouses. Customers are using data lakes. So is data lake not enough? Why would you as a customer build a lakehouse platform on AWS? And I hope I'm going to try to answer that kind of question, and you can see the benefit of why you as a customer you use this. Now take a look at the evolution, right? Let's just rewind back firstly. So traditionally everyone just used to use data warehouses. So after the invent of relational databases, the next thing in the industry was a database warehouse. So now this is where all these relational databases, all these transactional databases, data from these business units started going into this one data warehouse system. And the data warehouse then, in some form, it would visualize this data. There will be a dashboard. It will be presented there. So that standard remained there for a while. But the industry moved on, right? They moved on and says, no, started moving into data lakes. And this is where on Amazon, we say S3 is your centerpiece of your data lake. It comes in with all these basic storage of, it's expand as you learn the data. You don't have to be thinking about how much the data is, and you have to build that. It's there for you. It's cost effective. And a lot of companies started combining their data warehouse and data lakes. And now the question then started to become, you have a data warehouse, you have a data lake, you want to perform queries that's on data that's on a data warehouse, on data lakes. What do you need now to do this integration? So, and that is why now where we started talking about, okay, you needed a lakehouse architecture. And what does this lakehouse architecture mean? What does it give us? So if you're looking there at the right side of this diagram that we are having here, we're saying, all right, cool. We know that there's an explosion of data, right? So, and this data, because it's coming in from different sources, all these different sources, they have various data stores that are suitable for the data when it comes. So if you have an application that's a social media, it requires a different data store than an application that's selling goods. So you have all these data stores with all these data, and you move this data, some of it you customize, you move it into your data warehouse. But what does the lakehouse architecture mean? It means that you are trying to create a system or a way where firstly, you can, from your data lake, you can query outside. You can query this data that's sitting on those data stores without the moving of that data. By moving, it means you're copying the data. So we're trying to say, how do you do that other challenge we're talking about, which is make quick decision making? To do this quick decision making, if you have a data that's on your database, it first always has to be moved and copied into your data lake. During that copying time or moving, you are not getting any decision being made because you are still waiting for the data to move. Only once the data has been moved, it's checked that it's correct, you can make a decision. So now the lakehouse formation or architecture says, no, we need to fast track this. From the lake already, you could have this other data that sits on the lake that eventually sits on the lake. But if you are there on the lake and you need to get some insights on some data that is happening, you have the historic data that's on the lake, but you want to link it with what has happened in real time. From the lake, query, you don't have to now move that data in. Query this data inside out and get the insights. All right, that's the one tenant or the one idea that we are trying to achieve. The other second idea that we are trying to achieve with this lake house architecture is that, but these data sources themselves, what if you have a data that's in a non-relational store and you have another data that's in the relational store, but this is the data about the same entity. So you have Vuyisa might have transacted and done something, and it's also same Vuyisa that's sitting on the non-relational. You need to query and you link this data. So what about those services themselves? Can you get this data to not to move? I don't have to be now taking a data that's relational, converting it into a non-relational format, import it there, and then query it. So how do you do this? This is now the idea of what we are trying to do with this approach. So you would see there that this approach is built on Redshift being at the centerpiece, built on top of S3. Is there someone saying something? Oh. Okay, cool. With Redshift, we have a capability that is called data sharing, and we have federated queries, and we have a capability with Spectrum, which allows you to then read this data that's sitting on S3. So if you are using all of these services, you are combining these capabilities, it then gives you this capability where you can, from Redshift, query data that's sitting on your relational database that's currently happened now, combine this with a flat file data that's already sitting in your S3 data lake, and from that you can get a visualization. So now when marketing is run a campaign, they have their cluster and their data to match what has marketing done to what the sales they've brought in versus that campaign. You no longer have to copy the data, move into the one data warehouse and insert it there, and then only then do you have this joining capability. No, from these two clusters, you can then say, okay, from marketing, we want to share this data. We want to share it with this sales team, and sales team, here's the data. That's the idea that we're selling here, and that's the idea that the market and the industry is adopting at this stage. So hopefully with these examples, I'm now illustrated to you how the industry, on how our customers in mostly are adopting and implementing a lakehouse architecture powered by Redshift with that data sharing capability to minimize data movement and also make help with that fast decision making. That is now how we are, with this solution, addressing that challenge. I would like to move to a quick demo of on Redshift. Let me just pause here. So can you still see the screen? Oh, all right, cool. Yes. We have curated steps and examples, right, on how you can get started on deploying Redshift. And this is not just Redshift. This cuts across many of our services where we say, okay, here's a guidance on how you can do. So I'll be sharing this resource with the organizers who can then distribute it. But this is a nice step-by-step explanation of how you can create a data warehouse cluster, you can load your data, and all of these capabilities that we had touched upon. It's how you can then implement it. So this is, if you wanted to know how to implement those capabilities, you would find that here. So let me just quickly show you how you would get started with this. Let me open my account. Yeah. Oh, screen sharing has stopped. Oh.
Yeah.
Let me fix that. Is it back now?
Yes, yes.
Sure. Thank you about that. So I've just logged in onto the AWS console. So I was referring to, I'm not sure if you were seeing this. Maybe I was just talking by myself then at that stage. All right, cool. So we have curated this step-by-step lab, which can, it's a guidance on how to implement these capabilities that we are referring to here. So if you want to understand how you can make your data warehouse cluster as part of your lakehouse architecture, do machine learning, you can come here and you can see how the step is done. How do you do the visualization of that data with Power BI? You know, all of this is here. How do you do data sharing? All of what we have talked about here. If you have your data that's sitting in a different data store, as an example, Oracle or SQL Server, how do you bring it into Redshift? So if you are in a situation where you work on a project like that, this could help be a helpful resource for you to get started to use. How do you do for enterprises? Now, the single sign-on, you know, the integration where you have users that are given their usernames and passwords on AD, and how do they federate and access the Redshift cluster and continue to work. All of these, you can find this step-by-step guide here. So I'm just going to be covering just the get started part, just to show you how you can get started, but I'll be sharing the materials. In another time, it will be great to just go through all of these details and show you how it works. So on the AWS console, right? So if we click, okay, how to get started. So you click, it explains there on how you get started. You do need an AWS account to get started. That's just what they are explaining there. And then we also have what we, a service called CloudFormation. This is a infrastructure as code service where you can build a code of how your infrastructure and you want it to be deployed, and you use this service for that. So it does come with a launch stack with what that code looks like. An example of this, you can let me know if you are still seeing this thing or not.
Oh, yes.
It's visible.
Okay, cool. So you come to your AWS console, you go to your CloudFormation, which you can select. Once on CloudFormation, you can basically go with that link, the one that is provided for you in the launch stack. It will just start to pre-populate for you or what the template. Everything is already pre-built, so you can just, you don't have to make few changes. You just click next on this one. It comes in with a name. What's the instance type of what you're going to be using on your Redshift cluster? How many nodes do you have? There's a username and there's a password. What's the default database? All of this is pre-configured. And then you just need to make the change on making this change of trying to put your own IP address here because you are allowing who can access to your to this cluster. You want this to be yourself. So let me just copy my own address. And then the other important change is, you know, on AWS, we do have the concept of saying when you are creating an AWS account, you get root access. You get an account that is the default account is a root access. But with that account, we advise not to use it for day-to-day operations. The advice is you rather go in once you've logged on and created an account successfully, you log in and you create a user, and this user becomes your administrator that you are going to use to do further operations with. So this template here is asking for that user. It's asking, do you have a user like that? So to gain a user like that, so we do have an identity an access management service where you manage your users. I am users. So I do have a user there that I created for this workshop. That is the user, that's an administrator that you can use. So for me, the template itself is asking for that user. So I do have this user, it's a workshop. I just called it, that's a username itself, but you would see the rights I gave. And this is now where you can manage what users can do what. You can attach policies, you can give them permissions. For now, I've given this one administrator access. It's the only user I have. So all my operations, I don't want to do as a root user, but I rather want them to be done with this administrator access user. So I copied the ARN, so I'm then gonna use that. So now you are using these operations and you are running it with this user that I'm created myself. Do I want data to be loaded into this cluster? Because the workshop itself, if you go back to the workshop, you do have the step 2 as a data loading. You can choose, you can either do it here yourself, or you can let the creation do the data loading. But because there's a step that does that, you can say, no, I want to know, because the purpose for you to learn, do you want to do data sharing? These are all the options. You say, no, I'm going to come to a lab that will do that. That will make me learn how to do that. And then do you want to launch an additional VM where you're going to run your tooling? Now, this is where the other steps in the lab require you to create this VM. So you would see here for labs 11, 12, and 18, you do need, because we do have Power BI, which sits in this VM. We do have these other tooling. So that VM is going to just run all those softwares. So you just select that, okay, you would like to use that. That's about the only changes you've made. So the changes you've made, you just gave it your own IP, gave it your own user, and said, yes, okay, I would like to have a VM. I don't have all these softwares on another machine. But if you had all these softwares already on another machine, you don't need this step. So everything else is pre-built for you. You just click continue. This is optional. What do you want when there are errors happen? Do you want the resources that were successfully created to be kept, or do you want us to go back and delete everything? I choose that option, but either of the two options, it would work. And then it just gives you a last screen to say, okay, these are the selections you've made. We are about to go to launch and create this. And do you acknowledge that you are going to be using an IIM user? Yes, because we did, remember, came and asked and use an IIN. So it's just confirming to us those choices that we are making there. So we acknowledge that, yes, we are doing this, and we click the creation of the stack. So the stack will start to create. This stack, it takes about 5 minutes to create. So I'm not going to be waiting for the 5 minutes to create, but I'll rather then move on to another account of mine, which already has the stack fully created. All right, I go to CloudFormation. Again, this is where the creation of that stack will be. You can see here, this one is successfully created. When it is successfully created, you can want to see what resources did the stack launch. So when you go into your stack and you can see the resources, it will give you, these are the resources it has created. But we do know that the purpose of what I wanted to do was to launch and create a Redshift database warehouse. So I go to Redshift and access that warehouse. So I come to the page. I do see that I do have my database running here. When you come, this is the landing page. You can see that the data sharing, we don't have anyone yet. We are sharing this cluster with, this is the default behavior. Yes, while the capability to share your cluster with other departments exist, it's not a default behavior. You have to opt in. You have to say, I'm allowing these department or this cluster access, and this is the data set they can have access to. So it is something that you as the owner manage. So that's why by default it's not there. You can see we don't have any queries running, we don't have any database connections, and all of this is something that you can use. This is now that CloudWatch component that we talked about, that our services come with CloudWatch, those metrics, that telemetry that you can use when you want to build that operational excellence to understand how your cluster is working. Query overview, and then we do have this when we do have features and spotlights or that we like to highlight to you, new services, so related to Redshift, those will be announced here. However, one of the things that we can do on this Redshift, we've built a query editor where now you can connect and run queries on your Redshift cluster. So we have two versions. In 2019, we launched the first version, which is Query Editor, and sometimes it's called Query Editor V1. And then as we worked with customers, they gave us more requirements, and as we were building those requirements, it became then not feasible to add them on the existing feature, so we added a new V2. So if we just look at V1 for start, so you now need to connect to your database. So there's a connect option there that you need to provide. So you would connect here. If you are recent or if you've been using your database, this option appears and you can use an existing connection, which before it times out, there's a timeout on how long the connection can be. However, we are creating a new connection here for ourselves. We have these two options, right? The option one is temporary credentials and the other option is secrets manager. Now, traditionally, how have we managed connections to a database? Connections to a database, you either have, run that command, create user, visa, grant access, and you start granting permissions. That's the way that traditionally databases have had. And because that is at the database level and that is in plain text, on AWS, we came up with a method to say, okay, you can run that command, create that, but then do not keep this in plain text. Move this into the service called Secrets Manage. So this is where you would use this option. So you have created the database. It's in the user. It's in the database, but you don't want to be using those plain text username and passwords. You use the Secrets Manager. So you configure Secrets Manager to hold that connection details, and you use it there. The other option is, okay, you don't create these users inside the database themselves, but you use the IAM, this identity and access management service, where you create your user and you grant your user permissions there. So you can use that option. And with this option, you can grant the user already there, amongst other services, the access to your Redshift cluster, and you give them permissions there. So that's the option that you can then use. So those are the two options that are available on version 1. Now you can see here, I've said I've worked with a lot of FSI customers. There's one huge option which they've always all wanted, because all of these options mean there's an administration overhead. Option 1, every time you have a new user, you want to grant access to your database, you have to create in the database, you have to always manage this user inside the database. Option 2, you either creating these on IAMs, but again, you have, this other place where you have to manage your users. Now, large-scale companies, big organizations, they already have a place where they do this, and they do this in one location. Now, they don't want, when they come to AWS, and to have this in a different location as well. They already have systems that they use, their AD systems, where they already are managing their users there. And that's why you would see that on the version 1, it doesn't have that option. But just to continue with the connection, I think the default database was dev. My user is AWS user. So you would populate this. That's how you would do, and it will connect. Database dev does not exist. Okay, my database is not fully created yet. All right, cool. It's just a database doesn't exist yet. It's not fully created. But let me move on then to version 2 to just highlight now this feature that it's version 2. It's the added benefit of using this one. So if you come to version 2, now version 2, it will cascade, it will, when you are connecting it to it for the first time, it wants to know, all right, have you configured version 2 for this account? What is KMS? KMS is our key management service, which is we use for our encryption. So have you configured so that when whatever you are doing with your interaction is encrypted? All right, cool. No, we haven't, because I'm using this for the first time. Can you? I'm just saying, okay, please configure it for me. And then you can see that the console has changed. You can see now it's also indicative that it's now on version 2. Now we have our cluster here, so now we need to connect to this cluster on version 2. But now you can see on version 2 there is now a third option. The third option is that of a federated user. Now this is now where many of the users have always been asking us. This was one of the top-rated features that they wanted. They wanted this feature where you can use the federation, you manage users in one central place, you grant them there. You don't have to be managing permissions in multiple places. That's the key benefit amongst other benefits of version 2, but it also still supports the traditional one. So AWS user, and we can create our connection. Database fails to match the required. What's my template? Let me just check my template. My A was capital. It was meant to be lowercase AWS user. So now I've connected to my database. I can run a query. Let me just do that test query. Here we do have a test query. Here we go. So you can see that in a short space of time on AWS, you can come and build a data warehouse cluster with multiple nodes. If you look at that provision cluster, it's got 2 nodes, and you can query it. You can connect and query it. This is now the advantage of the AWS cloud, that ease of use. And also we do take account the requirements for our users. If the users tell us that when we are using this feature, it is administration overhead for us to manage users, and we would like to integrate with what we already are using, we can therefore use the AD. So this is another key benefit where we work with our users and our customers to build features of our products. And if I could just, as a last bit, the one that we had left launching, I want us to go see. I guess it's been 5 minutes now. It should have completed. Okay, it's still in creation, in progress. All right. That's all I wanted to do to demonstrate as to how you can get started with Redshift. Now, let me just stop and continue with the conclusions. can let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, we can
Yes,
see.
it's visible.
All right, cool. In summary, what the session was to try and show was that, on AWS, we do offer this broad range of databases and analytics services. But the key takeaway is that these services are purpose-built. So we purpose-built, and therefore, for every use case that you have to then start by architecting for what you need. So if today you need a solution to do something, you start just and focus on what you need today. Should you need a certain feature in the future to plug in, it becomes easier. Two, the services that you can adopt are fully managed. And what this tried to mean by these managed services is that we allow you to focus on your application. As you saw there, to get a Redshift cluster going, I didn't have to go to the infrastructure team and ask them for a server, ask them for storage, network. I just went in and I said, here's a code of what I want. I want this, and you specify your requirements and you launch. So that my aim is to build an application, not necessarily to be managing infrastructure. These services are battle tested. They are used globally at scale. They have deep functionality, which today we didn't get into. Today was just an overview. But this is the first of many of my sessions joining your meetups. Maybe out of interest, you could indicate to the organizers, maybe one day you want a more deeper dive into a specific service, and then we can then drill down a little bit more on that. But you also would get a higher availability, the performance and the reliability of the cloud by moving your workloads into AWS and adopting these services. So how can you now get started? You're thinking, okay, hey, what Visa said was resonating. I'm interested. We do have some very wide variety of assets that are available. These are free digital assets that you can learn upon and adopt these services. I'll share the link so that you can adopt this. We also do have classroom instructor-led. Those are more paid for options. So, and then we also do have some, when we run and launch maybe big summits, and you can have credits to write certain exams there. But I would encourage everyone that's on the call to at least go and view the free assets. All it takes is the time on your side, and everything else we will provide for you. And then you can, this is a very good building block and a starting point that you can start on. And also one of the other things that I would like you to do then is just if you can complete a survey that will go to Veliswa and them, who are our organizers. They can just get an idea on how you view our involvement in these sessions. I would leave this for those that have phones with the QR code or the link. Let me also maybe try and do this because this link, it's available. Now, I hope you've been posting your questions because we do have our team who's been keeping an eye on the chats. But I didn't see questions while I was presenting. So if there are any questions, anyone can come out and share their questions.
Okay, so thank you very much, Visa, for your presentation. It was really much before we get into the next speaker, who is Jose, or even Visa, you can also assist us in answering the questions. On the chat box, I can see some of the few questions which have been raised by were some of our attendees here in.
Does AWS have a cluster service specific to MongoDB?
Okay, so one of the questions is.
Go ahead.
Okay. One, does AWS home? Okay.
Yes, we do have, it's called Amazon Document DB, which is, it has the Mongo compatibility. So we do have a service for that, yes. We can share those resources and links for that service.
Okay, so I think that is well answered. Okay, so this is the link Lunga has shared with us, which I believe it explains more about that question. So
yeah, so I did share a link for the document DB. You can also run a fully managed MongoDB database via AWS Marketplace as well.
we can go to the next speaker, who now we are going to give the offer to Sharon to introduce our next speaker. Then after that, we'll have some more questions after the next speaker takes over. So Sharon, introduce to us the next speaker.
Okay. Thank you, Nicholas. Hello, everyone. I hope you are all well. My name is Sharon. So it's such an honor to introduce our next speaker, who is a senior solution architect at AWS Dubai. He has over 10 years experience in developing, architecting IoT, mobile app, and web application solution. He is also 10 times AWS certified. He's very passionate about AWS technologies. And today he'll be taking us through AWS Amplify, which is a great set of tools for developers to seamlessly develop their apps and deliver business value. I welcome Ose to take on the next presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And you're hearing me fine, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So let me just share my screen and then we'll start from there. Okay, so guess you're seeing my screen. So now let me just share my slide and then start. Okay, so just before I start, can you just give me a feedback? You're seeing my slide, right?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, I can see.
Great. Okay, great. So hi, everyone, and thank you for having us. So my name is Usainu Hadimbe, and thank you very much for the introduction. And today I wanted to share a bit about AWS Amplify and more generally how we can help you accelerate web and mobile development. So I've been with AWS for over 3.5 years now. I started as a specialist in Internet of Things, and it's a topic that I would be happy to talk to you about but most likely on a different session because we are a bit short on time. So we'll be happy to have follow-up on Internet of Things, but today, the main focus will be around web and mobile development and how to accelerate in AWS. And also, just as you did previously, please drop your questions on the chat, and Lunga and Visa will be looking at them and answering them. And if needed, they will prompt me also to stop and take care of some of the questions. So just as an agenda in terms of what I want to share with you today. So we start with an overview of what is Amplify, but mainly it's going to be about what are the requirements of modern web applications. So how do you develop the modern web application? And then from there, we will talk about why we created Amplify, how to build feature-rich applications. And by feature-rich application, what it means is that what about if you want to add location to your app? You want to have a map, you want to trace certain assets. For instance, you want to add analytics. Like those are some examples of what I mean by building feature-rich application. So again, also how to build the application backend. And this is going to show also a bit of why actually we build Amplify, because it's purpose-built in the fact that it's built mainly for front-end developers to be able to build full-stack application, not having to be expert on the back-end side of it, and we at AWS will take care of that, but I will talk in more details about that. And then also I will talk to you about a fairly new feature of Amplify that's called Amplify Studio that allows actually, maybe some of you know Figma, which is a very popular framework that is used to design user experience. And what Amplify Studio does is that it can take as input a Figma design, and from there generate a React application that you can then customize and host on AWS. So I will share with you also a brief demo of Amplify Studio. And the last part of it would be about how to host applications, because you will see that Amplify is a set of solutions, not just one service. So when we talk about modern web applications, so what are the requirements that we are seeing from our customers? So what we see is that our customers want to deliver with the lowest possible latency to their users, and they want to do that globally. And they don't want also to provision for peaks. They want the application to be scaling up and down depending on the traffic. And also they want to deliver to hundreds of different type of terminals. So might they be desktop browsers or mobile application, might they be iPhones, Android, and so on, so forth. Also, they want to have continuous monitoring, because you want to identify issues actually before even they impact the experience of your users. They want increased agility, so which means innovate faster and even go to market faster, so which is really key. And also Viswa touched on it also when he was talking about why he does not believe that customers would be moving back to on-premises 5 years down the road. The agility that you get in the cloud, it allows you to experiment. It allows you to also do what we call fail fast with, I would say, control environment, because you just provision for what you need, and then when you don't need it, you do not use it anymore. But yeah, I will not extend a lot onto that question, Biswa give you fairly good insight on what is the value proposition of the cloud. But coming back to modern applications, so what also our customers do not want is to manage physical servers, because that's not their business, their core business. What they want is to focus on what they know, what is their business, what they know best, and then all the infrastructure part of it, they will leave to a company like ours, which this is our job. So, and that helped them also lower total cost of ownership, because also you have this model of you only paying for what you use. So customers also, they want to create feature-rich application. And I give you a bit of example in terms of some use cases, in terms of analytics, and also in terms of location services that you might want to add. And last but not least is security. So build secure application. And at AWS, we like to say that security is our job zero. And what it means is that when security is not right, actually we stop everything that we were doing and we focus on fixing the security piece. And once that is done, we can continue working on different other aspects. So still on the modern application, so what I don't want you, I would say, to go with after this presentation is to think about to build mobile application and web application on AWS. You need necessarily and exclusively to use AWS Amplify. No, because you can build modern web application in AWS in different ways, and some of them are like building microservices, and we have different type of solutions helping you build on containers. We have Amazon Container Service, we have Amazon Kubernetes Services, that is a managed Kubernetes on AWS. So it's not exclusive to use one or the other. So or what we even advise is to use them in combination. And also talking about monitoring, also we have different services, and I will name just a few. We have CloudWatch, that is our monitoring service that will help you gather insights in terms of metrics, and then you can also act on that data when thresholds are being exceeded, and create some dynamic type of action that could be like triggering an automation, or just notifying someone on their smartphone or something like that, that an issue has happened. So, and not only that, also we have a service that's called X-Ray that actually allows you to do, to analyze actually your application and helps you debug. And it is, I would say, based on the business, because it helps you query from customer requests. So you can follow a customer request in the different layers of your application, and that helps you also debug your application. So on the front end side of it, what AWS Amplify offer you is also a hosting service. So you can host a static and server-side rendering application, and that also came also from listening to our customers, that when they talk about modern application, most likely it's about single page application, server-side rendering application, or using static site generation. So Amplify is our offering to help accelerate web and mobile development. And it's a set of components, and I will dive a bit more into details around it. But it has what we call a command line, so very friendly for developers, where you can create your application and add capabilities to them. It has also Amplify Studio that I talked a bit about, which is a visual interface where you can design your application, you can create your data model without even having to write any code. And it helps you generate the corresponding backend on AWS. And that is really, I would say, the opinionated view that we had on Amplify is that we will create the backend for you and you focus on building your front end. And yes, on the security side of it, so for instance, when we talk about the hosting of your application, so we offer CDN, that is Content Delivery Network, that also helps you fight denial of services type of application. We also offer free certificate also when you are also using our Route 53 DNS services, and also you have the capability also to bring your own domain. So now, yes, a bit more about AWS Amplify. So as a web or mobile developer, in general, there are, I would say, 3 phases in building your application. The first one is basically building your application, so creating the application, the front end, the back end, and putting the necessary features on your application. And for building that, AWS Amplify for web supports JavaScript and also framework that are around JavaScript like React, Angular, Vue, Next.js. And when we talk about mobile, we support Android, iOS, and also React Native. And in addition, also we support hybrid framework such as Ionic and also Flutter. So that's a bit about the build. But in addition to those languages that we support, the way that it works is that you will create your front end, and from your front end, you will say what are the capabilities that you want to add to the front end. And those capabilities could be, for instance, authentication. You say you want people to authenticate. Maybe you want to authenticate using federation to maybe Google or Amazon or Apple. So that's one type of feature that you might want to add. You might want to add also storage. Let's say you want your application to durably store data. It's something also you would be doing on this build phase. And then we as AWS, from that, we will create the corresponding backend for you, meaning that you don't need to be an expert on AWS to use AWS Amplify. And also, I mentioned to you that we have also a visual interface, but that I will talk about a bit more later. So on the shipping part, so you've already built your application, so now you want to host it. So we have Amplify hosting that is actually a Git-based workflow. So which means that your principles that you might be using in your companies or at school, that's called DevOps, is also embedded into the tool. So you can deploy your application into AWS and you can version them. You can have like production environment, you can have staging environment, and so on, so forth. So that also is taken care of. And then I will talk a bit about the scale part of it. So in terms of the scale, one thing that is really powerful about Amplify is that the backend that it is generating, it's doing it using CloudFormation. And we saw talk to you a bit about CloudFormation. It's infrastructure as code, which means that you will define your infrastructure as you would in a code, and you can version your infrastructure. So quite powerful. You can just put your infrastructure code into Git and also manage it the way that you would manage a code. But one aspect of it that is really powerful is that it's not just creating it for you, like creating the infrastructure using CloudFormation, but it allows you also to export actually the template that was used to create your infrastructure in CDK. CDK is Cloud Development Kit. It's still infrastructure as code, but with CDK, we meet our customers where they are. So we give them the freedom to use programming language that they are using regularly. For instance, if they are more using JavaScript or Python, we offer them to write their infrastructure using that. Whereas if you are using CloudFormation, you can do it on TypeScript or JSON, but you cannot like use any, I would say, language that you would want to build it. So you can export also what is generated by Amplify and build on top of that. So here, yes, diving a bit deeper also. So in terms of also what is the value proposition? So getting to market faster. So how? You get to market faster because we provide you also libraries. Because let's take the example of you wanting to have a data store. So without Amplify, what you would need to do is that you build your application, you build your backend, but then you need also to build the link between your front end and your backend. So you need to integrate with libraries. You need to build. We have libraries that you can use to talk to AWS, but what it means is that as a developer, you would need to know a lot about AWS before you can even start integrating with it. And that's not what we wanted. What we wanted is we create the libraries and we actually will take care of linking your front-end component to the corresponding backend. And we will be using APIs, and I will, for instance, you can use REST APIs, GraphQL API, and that's GraphQL API that we are using, for instance, if you choose a data store that you can also work with offline, because it's give you this capability that, let's say, and also a lot of areas are also in that type of environment. You don't have, I would say, a great connectivity all the time. So the connectivity will come and go, and you need to have a seamless experience. So how do we help you? We offer you data store that you can interact with when you are offline, and then we will manage the logic to synchronize data to the cloud once the connectivity comes back up. So this is really something that customers would struggle to build the logic themselves, but now they don't need even to worry about it because we will manage that on their behalf. So the data modeling also, you can even do it visually, and that also I will show you in a demo. The built-in backend code, I talked about it also. So let me shift a bit about the build a feature-rich application. So I talked about location, I talked about authentication, but let's talk about, for instance, AI ML. So let's say that you're building a mobile application that needs to translate a text, that needs to convert text to speech, that need to recognize object in an image. So for instance, I don't know, you are having an application that is based on a video feed, and that will, for instance, tell you if there is, for instance, an employee not wearing security protections, for instance, if they are like, I take the example of the utilities, for instance, is something that could be very valuable. So just bringing also back to the IoT experience. So you you can use this type of system to protect people. So you can recognize that they are not wearing their protective equipment, and then you can, for instance, lock, I would say, the next action that they would have wanted to do. So just to give you an example of how you can use also AI ML within your application. So the scale also talked about it a bit, but let's touch on the global reach. So today you are building an application, so maybe your target is local, so you have maybe local target, but your application is successful and is being used abroad also. You don't need to acquire servers in different countries yourself, because we have a global footprint and you can take advantage of it. And also the reliability also comes with the AWS network, and also we have availability zones that are set of data centers that are also one of our reliability pillars, because they are far enough not to be, I would say, probably affected by a same disaster, like might it be flooding, something like that, but also close enough that you can have one digit, one single digit millisecond latency. So that comes, I would say, from our infrastructure, and you benefit from it when you're using Amplify, and also you are hosting your applications on AWS. So yeah, so I've told you also on my introduction that Amplify is not just one thing, it's a combination. So we have the libraries, and one is, for instance, the data store library. We have the command line, CLI, and which is a tool chain that developers can use to create their application, maintain them, and so on, so forth. We have Amplify Studio, which I'm going to demo for you, which is the visual interface where you can set up your application and your backend. And also we have the hosting of modern web application that are static application. So this is, I would say, a summary of what Amplify is. And now talking about the building process. So we now have identified that you can do it with either the CLI or the Studio, or you can use the libraries directly into your applications, because you don't even need to use Amplify CLI nor Amplify Studio to build Amplify aware application. You can just use the libraries directly into your code. And for the features also, I have mentioned some of them. Let me just touch on a few I have not touched on. So let's talk about analytics, for instance. So when you enable the analytics capability of Amplify, what it does is that it will create the backend side of a service that's called Pinpoint. And Pinpoint is a marketing tool that allows you also for analytics. So in terms of, it can tell you like what are the pages that are visited. It can tell you also about the behaviors of your users. You can also target your users. So for instance, you can send them email, push notifications, and all of that you can do using the analytics capability. So a bit also about the pub/sub capability that comes actually with GraphQL API. So the principle is that for certain application, the query pattern should not be you querying a backend regularly. So like I'm checking every second, I'm checking every 3 seconds, and so on and so forth, because the data might not be changing as frequently as you are doing your check, and that's not cost optimized because you are using your network, you're using the bandwidth, and maybe there are some queries that are more important also that are not delivered correctly. So the pub/sub, it's publication subscription. So what it means is that you just subscribe to a certain entity, and whenever there is a modification, you will get that pushed to you. And it means that your application logic could be quite simple. And for instance, it could be also on the IoT space. So let's say also you are monitoring a device and you don't know how frequently the data will change. For instance, if it's a temperature, what are you going to do? Are you going to query it every second? Let's say if you do it for 30 minutes or maybe an hour, it will give you the same value, and then it might maybe fluctuate a bit. But what you are interested in is the change, because if it comes from, I would say, 20 to 30, that could have impact in terms of the business that you are monitoring. And here is the type of notification that you could get. So yeah, so moving on to being more specific in terms of you being builders today. If you want to build with Amplify, what are the technologies that you can use? So talked about JavaScript and also framework that are based on it. So React, React Native, Angular, Vue, Next.js. You can also build not natively. So you can build for Android using Java or Kotlin. You can build also natively on iOS using Swift also. And also it supports hybrid frameworks such as Ionic and Flutter. So this gives you, I would say, quite a good view in terms of can you integrate with Amplify today within the work that you are doing. So now, yeah, let's talk a bit about the backend side of it. So the backend side of it, you can build it using these three methods. So Amplify Studio, I will not talk more about it because you see a demo, but just understand that with Amplify Studio, you have a visual environment, and from there you can build your model, and we will create the backend. And when we create the backend, actually, we create DynamoDB table. And we also talk to you about our key pair database that is DynamoDB, and that's what we are using on the backend. And we use a GraphQL API to connect to that. So now Amplify CLI also is full stack CI/CD compatible. So I talked to you about using a Git-based workflow, and that you can have the different staging, production, and different environment that you need. And I will finish on the combination of Amplify and Cloud Development Kit. And this is very useful, I would say, for customers that has existing modern applications, because when you look at Amplify Studio, it might seem to you that, okay, so I need to start from scratch. I need to build my my front end, and then it will generate my back end. But what happens if I have already something running? So that's where this combination helps you, because you can still generate from the studio, but then what you generate, you can integrate with existing systems. So when you build with Studio, just a few things I want to highlight is that you can have different personas, because Amplify Studio actually is outside of AWS console. So it means that you can use Amplify Studio without even having access to AWS console. And it makes sense, because for your UX designer, maybe they don't need to have access to the backend of your application. So it's autonomous in terms of you can use it without having access to AWS console. You can set up authentication, authorization of who can do what, depending on the personas. And this is showing you a bit how to model, but you will be creating a model in terms of what are you trying to build. And in the demo that I'm going to show you, we are going to try to build a store and actually to sell home. So we are going to try to build an online store in the demo. But then to sell a home, so you would need to the characteristic of a home, of a house, and then the different type of entities that they are linked to, generate data, and so on and so forth. But that we will see a bit later. So in parallel also, you can use AWS CLI, the command line. So this is, I would say, developer friendly. So in terms of you'll have a terminal as you use to maybe on Linux or in Mac and Windows also, you have a terminal, and from that terminal you write instructions, like you do amplify create app, and then you do amplify add feature, and then you can add, for instance, analytics. So if you are more comfortable doing that, we offer you the CLI for that. And when you create your backend, we are using GraphQL to connect to it. And this is just an example of showing you how you would model the relationship. And just touching a bit on GraphQL. So GraphQL, actually the power of it, or one at least, is that GraphQL allows you to query different type of data sources. So in one query, you can talk to a relational database, you can talk to a key pair database, you can talk to an other API, for instance, a REST API. You can do that in one query. And one other thing that is very powerful with GraphQL also is that you will be telling what you need in terms of payload back to you. So what I mean is that you don't need to query all the data. For instance, if you had a strict API, you could, whenever you query it, it will give you like 3 or 5 items. So with GraphQL, you can say that, okay, I know this API can send me 5 items, but I need only 2. And you will only get 2. And that is really powerful in terms of not having to query frequently, and also not having to have big payload. And that also comes to reduction of cost. So the extension also, I talked a bit about it, but quite powerful if you have existing teams that are developing without using Amplify. So you can have teams that use Amplify, some others that don't, but still share the same backend, because they can all use CDK, integrate components that others have created, and work smoothly together in a DevOps fashion. So now a bit about Amplify Studio. So Amplify Studio, actually, you can, and we provide you with existing components that you can use. So you can like have cards, footers, and so on and so forth. We have components that AWS have already created, you can use out of the box, but you can also integrate with Figma. And Figma is very popular UX design tool. And what we allow you is that you build your user experience with Figma, and then you just share the link of that Figma artifact, and then we will import those into Amplify Studio. Then you can link it with data that is on your backend, and we generate for you a React application, and we generate also what we call clean code. So it's not like an obfuscated code that you cannot modify or something like that. No, it's a readable code, and you can modify yourself. So yes, since it's going to be a demo, I will not talk about more about it, but this is how it would look like. And yeah, here you would just put your Figma link, but I will pass. So now just a bit about the hosting. So the way we talk about modern applications, so what we see from our customers is that now they're building client-side rendering single-page application, and they are doing it using popular frameworks such as React, Angular, Vue. And as I showed you earlier, we support those. So here we do what we used to do in terms of listening to our customers, and we integrate with those. So server-side rendering also with Next.js, Gatsby, those also we support, and also static site generation also with Gatsby we support. And also when you host your service on AWS, you benefit from our CDN, content delivery network, and it means that you can serve your content also globally with caching mechanisms. And also, as I said, it's not exclusive. You can have your microservices also running on other services, such as AWS Kubernetes services, for instance. So now just showing you what we support in terms of repository. So GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, and of course our own solution that's called AWS Code Commit. And then you would configure your build. And from that configuration, we will deploy your application and we will make it available globally. I mean, if you want to restrict, you can do it. But if you want to have a global reach, serving customers all around the world, you can also do it. So just diving a bit deeper on the hosting capability. So global availability, I talked about it. You can use your own custom domain, because when you just deploy, we will create our own, I would say, domain that would include the name of the service, but you can bring in your custom domain. And also there's a simplify workflow in terms of when you link it to, for instance, a GitHub repository, every time that you push code there, it can trigger the whole chain of build and deploy. So you have, I would say, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development built in. And I'm sorry for people that I'm saying CI/CD and that they don't know what that stands for just a while. Okay. So we have also the capability of supporting multiple branches. So you can have your master branch that would go to production, and then feature branches and staging and so on. So, and the deployment are atomic. And what we mean by then is that every time you do a deployment, the end result is customer facing, or could be customer facing. So it's not like partial deployment, but every time that you do this deployment, you have, I would say, something that is ready for your customers to use. And you can also password protect the hosting. So just maybe summarizing on the benefits. So the performance, we talked about being globally accessible using our content delivery network. The flexibility also. So we talked about also the integration with multiple AWS services without you needing to know very well the underlying system. So the agility, so again, very key, because you, in a competitive world, speed matter. So it allows you to build faster, to market also faster. The scale also, you don't need to provision for peaks. When you were on your own data center, you would need to provision for peak, because what will happen then if you do your successful marketing, what happens is your application is successful. But here you don't need to. You just build your application, ship it, and we, AWS, depending on the traffic we are receiving, we will scale up, scale down your platform. And this lowers your total cost of ownership, because you're only paying for what you use, which you wouldn't if you were on premises. And I will finish with supporting the modern framework, and that I've shared with you. So also, since we are at AWS, I would say we are customer obsessed. I mean, all we do, even our services that we built, the roadmap for more than 75% comes from customer feedback. So it's important also for me to share with you some of the customers that we have that are using Amplify. And I will start with us, because if what we are building is so cool that we want to share with everyone, why don't we use it ourselves? And that's what we are doing. So Amazon Music is using Amplify. And the big advantage that Amazon Music sees in Amplify is the fact that you can extract the backend in CDK, because they had multiple teams and they didn't use necessarily Amplify. So this helps them to work together in an harmonious way and deploy using their best practices in terms of DevOps. And another customer that's called Hypertrack. So actually they build solution for tracking, it could be like cars or it could be assets. But what the customers need from them is tracking locations in real time and doing so also for a large number of devices. And that's what we help this customer with by using Amplify and AppSync. And AppSync actually is our managed version of GraphQL, that API language that I've been talking about since I started. So this is also another example. So now, being conscious of time. So what I did is, and I'm not cheating with you, this is a video. So when you use Amplify, there are some phases where there is like a wait that you need to do. Sometime could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and so on. So for this demo, and I think I did well because we are already over time. So I will just share with you this video that I will comment with you. So you go to the Amplify Studio, build an application, and here you will launch Studio. So you see here this link that is called Studio. So here we are in the Studio, and when we are in Studio, we can go to UI library and click on Get Started. And from here, we can integrate the Figma design that we have built using Figma. And Figma, we use it to build our user experience, and we can then import it into our Amplify Studio. So here we are in Figma, and this is the UX that is going to be imported. You put the link, you fetch it, and here you can also choose to accept or reject some of the templates. So you see here there is 28 components that has been detected, and we'll accept all of them. This is just a demo, and here you see all the 28 components. There are cards, different type of cards, and we can now dive deeper into these components and configure them. So we go to content, to model, actually, that model. And here, as I told you, we are creating home. So address, price, URL for an image. So this is how you define it with a type, and you say what is mandatory, what is not. And then you can add content. So content also could be generated. Here we are going to generate six house. And here you see address and price are defined in a way that it can generate you something that looks real. So you can have like address that looks like addresses, and that's what you're seeing here. And we just put a link of one photo, so you see all the house like looking the same, but it doesn't matter. This is just a demo. So we go back to the UI library and we use a card. So here, card B. So this was done by our designer. Looks quite nice to share, to monetize a house. We configure it, and then we see the different component. So we can modify also each of these components. For the image, for instance, we can go and add a URL. So here you see the image that we just added. The price also, we have a property also for that pricing. So we can use also that property. And we can do that with all of the properties, and we can also even hide some of the properties that we don't need. So quite flexible. We can shuffle the data. So the random data you can shuffle to see how it would look like. But here you see the same image because we're just using one image. You can create collections also. So collections, as the name states, is going to be a lot of houses. And then you can show them as list, as grid. You can work on the margins and so on. All of these you can do using Amplify Studio. And once you're done, you can get the component. And here we give you all the instructions that you need to install Amplify and also to download the corresponding React application. And if you have also an existing application, you can just download the component. So here we are fetching the application using Amplify pool. And here it's going to ask you to log in. So because I told you Amplify is outside of AWS console. So here you authenticate. And once you authenticate, it will bring you back to the console. And since it is the first time, there's some configuration that you need to do in terms of the application, the directories, and so on and so forth. But once you do that, it will synchronize with the cloud version, and then it will download all the components that we have just seen. And here you use this. So here you see the code that was generated will integrate the components. So these are the components that you see in the cards and so on and so forth. And you can go into your app.js. And here also we provide you with the line of code that you need to integrate with this. You just have to copy and paste it into your code and run it. So here, this you are seeing is an application. So this is, I would say, how easy it is from a design that was done with Figma to build an application using Amplify Studio. So yes, so now moving on. Yes, so moving on. So just as Viswa did, so as a follow-up, what I would share with you is a workshop. And we have a workshop for a retail store. And with that workshop, you will build an application that will be based on Amplify using a Figma UX design that will generate a backend comprised of a DynamoDB table and also an S3. And S3 is our data lake. So it will be storing images and so on S3. And it will also integrate with authentication capabilities. So I will drop into the chat the link to this workshop. It's a guided workshop step-by-step on how to build it. And I will advise you to go through it. And if you have any issue, you come back to us and we'll be happy to help you. And with that, I thank you very much. I thank you very much. And as just Viswa did, please provide feedback so you can scan it. And also I will drop the link on the chat. Thank you so very much and happy to also answer questions that you might have. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. User.
Thanks to you.
It is Monicas are here to answer any questions. So in a few minutes, we can answer the questions arising. And then a kind reminder is that we have a survey, which is questions and also use from our speakers. You can connect with them, then you can get to learn more about all that we have heard today. So currently we have the event survey. You can give us your feedback, your thoughts, and everything that you wish we can improve or we can add, and this will greatly help in the future events so that we can all grow together. So it's a few minutes of Q&A questions, networking also, and any other agenda arising to our speakers. You are much welcome to ask anything related to AWS, to cloud. Even if it hasn't been discussed in this session, you can ask anything. So welcome our attendees to ask anything.
All right, cool. Look, our services, right, are built such that you can move your code into the AWS, but you can also move the code out. The code itself, you do have the keys and everything that you can, protect it and move it within. So we don't really want to be saying you are locked in. And also, part of what we're trying to do when we are building these services is to also make use of these open source, collaboration projects. So, I mean, if you look at the product like Aurora, this product, you can take your existing code that you have and you move into it. And if you do feel the need one day you want to move out, we do have even another service that will help you to move out, because you already now have the data. We have the database migration service, which not only helps you move data into AWS, but also moves data out. So we don't believe in the locking in of customers. What we believe in is, as our philosophy, is to giving our customers choice, building our services such that they are the right tool for the job, where they focus on a particular function and purpose, and just allow our customers to be builders and build the applications, and we can just take care of that managing of the infrastructure on their behalf. And then I see someone asking about the career day. I guess we will have to take that offline and speak to our management about those ones. But yeah, we do have a team that does come to Kenya on a regular basis, though we do have presence locally. So it's not like we are all remote. I guess you might have heard Hussein is in Dubai, Lunga is in Johannesburg, and I'm in Cape Town. But we do have a team. We are here today because we are the experts in these fields, but we do have an AWS team that's on sites on a regular basis. So I guess we can reach out to the team and indicate to them that, you know, there's this interest coming out of this user group. Would they be able to accommodate? And so I guess it's something we can take it offline, Nick and Chris, and then we can put you in touch with the right team that can drive it forward.
Okay. So, okay, so there's also Abdati. Mohammed here is appreciating the session because it has been a great session for us all. Everybody, I believe, has learned something new. Then there is also another concern just received about the startups. How can AWS help the startups to grow and to make their feet into the cloud?
AWS loves startups, right? So I'll touch on this and then maybe hand over to Oseno, who can cover how on the market we are helping. We ourselves like to also believe ourselves as a startup. I mean, we were founded, Amazon started out of a garage, so we grew out to be this enterprise. Exactly from where these startups are, where someone has an idea and they build on that idea. We have a organization within AWS that supports and runs and in a way, you know, ensures that startups they get linked with the right teams. They get the right funding for their ideas. They come into these incubators where they collaborate with others, and they are put in touch with the venture capitalists, you know, who can help funding and do those rounds of funding. So we do have a team that understands that model and how it works, and we have programs for that. I guess it's a matter of putting whoever is interested in that startup part with the right people to get the relevant information on how to get going. But we do have programs, and you can leverage those even today. But maybe Usaino, you'd like to add more how are we doing it in this market?
Thanks, Visa. So Visa rightfully touched on it. So we have programs, and I shared a link. So it's called AWS Activate Founders, and you can go through there and then learn about all the different help that we provide to startup. But just to tell you, for instance, you can have credit on AWS platform that can go from $1,000 to $100,000 of credit. So this means that there are some criteria to be eligible, but you could be eligible even to $100,000 in credit on AWS platform. And what it would mean is that you can use the AWS platform up to that amount without you having to pay anything. So when we tell you that we love startup, we do, we really do. And I myself am focused on West Africa and mainly right now on Nigeria for our enterprise business. But we have like customers like Paystack, who you might know, or Flutterwave that you might know also, that actually came from a startup but now graduated to enterprise customers and are valued also more than $1 billion. So like the startup programs where we talk about unicorns and so on, they have even passed the threshold. And today we are starting managing them as enterprise customers. So we really do love startups, and please look at the program and look at all the things that we can support you. We also have startup teams that are looking after Sub-Saharan Africa. So if you need specific follow-up, we can put you into contact with the right people in our organization to support you.
Okay, so that is really insightful and also useful to many of us here, Jose and the user. So on my side, I have no question, but I think some of our organizers here might be also having some questions which could be beneficial. So we give offer maybe Christopher, then in a few minutes we will be winding up. So Chris, if you have any question, you can ask or any comment. Please go.
So thank you so much, our speakers, Ose, Lunga, Wisa. We're happy to have you. As a community lead, there's a question about I've been receiving about how students can be able to learn for free on AWS and what programs can they enroll in to be able to learn for free and gain knowledge on understanding the services AWS provides. Apart from that, now I would say thank you so much. I've been able to go through I've been interacting with Redshift, Glue, but at a point I had an issue, but today I'm able now to go to the next step. I think the session was so good, Wisa. And then we had Lunga helping us understand the questions, answering and everything. So thank you so much. I think you, for that question of student programs, you can maybe highlight the programs that some students now can enroll in for free. And we cannot also talk about the community builders program, which, okay, we are part of. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. So maybe I can give a try at it, and Wiswa and Lunga can also add to it if they want. So in terms of how how students can start for free. So my first, I would say, answer to you is the AWS free tier. So the AWS free tier, what it means is that when you create a new AWS account, for a year, you are eligible for free tier. And it means that you can use some of our services at no cost, given that you stay at certain threshold. Like if I take, for instance, the IoT space. So we would allow you to manage a certain number of devices, a certain number of message per second for free for a period of a year. And this applies for a lot of our other services. So first things I would say, please look at our AWS free tier. And then talking about, I would say, student and more specific, to be more specific. So we have programs. So I will also share on the chat. So let me drop it on the chat. So we have AWS Academy. Also, I will recommend you to have a look at. And we have also AWS Educate. So let me just also drop it on the chat. Okay. So for this topic, what I would advise is that we can have a follow-up where we can look at people from our training and certification team that owns this topic to come and talk to you about this program. But you can start reading a bit about it. But these are few input that I can give you as of now. So first is the free tier. For a year, you are eligible to use some of our services at no cost, given that you are not breaching certain threshold, and then these two program, and that we will be happy to follow up, but with the right team on our side, unless Vuiswa or Lunga wants to add something. Thank you.
No, you're quite spot on there. But to add to just that's not by any means it all. We also have self-paced, training where you can just go online and consume some of the material. So if you wanted, for as an example, to continue with this data analytics, others, IoT, and you want to do this at your own pace, and it is also free material. So there are all these various options, because I know as a student, you have, student bills to pay, and you wouldn't want to be maybe paying, for using AWS services and learning. So we do have a variety of all these programs. But yeah, we do have a training and certification pillar which owns all of these tracks, and they can come holistically to come and help should the need arise.
Yes, and if I may add just a small thing regarding our workshops also, is for you also to be careful in terms of there are some workshops that when you deploy them on your own AWS account, you will incur cost. So there are some workshops where not all the resources that are created will fall into the free tier. So just keep that in mind also. And also when you are doing this workshop, once you are done, use the cleanup section, because if you leave your Redshift cluster or some other things going on after you've done your workshop, you might have some surprise also. So just wanted to add that.
So okay.
Okay, so thank you very much, Jose and Veisa. So maybe Sharon can share with us something.
Okay, so for those asking about resources, we have our communities that we have formed around the continent. We have our Kenya user group. So in those communities, we're able to share resources and exchange ideas on how to be better. And then we have some communities that offer certification, so we can take advantage of that. Our speakers, I would love to really appreciate a good job. Thank you. It has been very insightful. Thank you to the audience. You all been well. Thank you for the questions. And now I will have to hand it over to Sam for closing remarks.